I'm Chris Hawes.
And I'm Julie Roddy.
And we're here from the Imam Hussein Islamic Center in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. And we're going to talk today about Islam in America. Islam is here to stay.
True.
And right now it is a faith made up mostly of immigrants. Do you think a distinctive American Islam will arise?
You know, I think Islam in America is different than in any other country because we do have the ability to kind of take Islam and to actually look at it for the true Islam. It allows us to maybe read about things, to see brothers and sisters from other countries, and not just to automatically say, okay, at this wedding or this activity, it has to be done in a certain way.
Now, some of the things that that I have heard are that often new converts, and maybe this is more in it takes place in Sunni centers than in our center. You know, our center's a Shia center, and so. Yes. We're the minority within the minority.
For sure, for sure.
And so maybe it takes place more in the centers of our Sunni brethren. But I've heard new converts say that they feel like they don't have an opportunity to speak, that they're kind of set aside. They're welcome, of course, but they're not incorporated into the main flow of the center. And have you run across that in any?
Actually, that you bring this up, I think it is interesting because I feel it depends on the environment in the masjid. Is it a large masjid? Is it maybe controlled by certain groups of people that are large in population or something? And it also depends on, are the people that are in control of that masjid or mosque willing to get other people involved, or do they like to continue to maybe control it or to have it more of a cultural place? Because I think we as American Muslims have found our own style. We're not having that baggage of having a cultural style. Like if we were from Pakistan or Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia or anything, we can follow Islam, but we know the rules of Islam. And so then we make it kind of our own. But yet we follow Islam, I think. But I think in our masjid, the executive committees like us to be involved. They
Yes.
actually prefer it.
Well, and
if
that's
we
been
are
my
involved.
experience. Yes, that's been my experience.
And so our masjid is maybe different. And actually, I think I've been at three other masjids. And they're not all the same. Everyone, and it's just like even for a Christian to go to a different church.
Yeah.
Every environment is a little bit different, and you know that's going to be the same with any religious gathering. But one thing I do know about our masjid is that they do encourage it and really want us to get involved.
Now, one thing that I would have to say has struck me is that at least here in the Twin Cities, it seems like one of the dominant groups are Somali Muslims.
For sure.
And so they tend to have their own centers where it's predominantly Somalis who are going there. That's going to reinforce their back home feeling.
Exactly.
You know.
That's going to be their comfort zone.
Yes.
You know, because I can understand that, because even for us, when we go to the masjid, of course our comfort zone is when we hear English.
Yes.
Or have something translated so we can understand it and we feel like we're a part of that masjid or mosque. So, but the Somalis, in some ways it's a good thing, but I also believe it can be a negative thing. Because I work in an elementary school, and I've had some kids come up to me in school and they see me wearing the scarf and dressed, and they instead of asking me, "Are you Muslim?" they'll say, "Are you Somali?" And I'm going, "No, I'm not Somali."
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but these children are going to a Somali masjid,
Yes.
and they're assuming all Somalis are Muslim.
Well, Muslims are Somalis.
Or exactly.
Yeah. And you know, I had the same thing working for Hennepin County Economic Assistance, and I went up to the window of a client one day, and I said to him, "Salam alaikum," and he did a double take and looked at me.
He wasn't.
And of course, then all of a sudden it rattled out, you know, alaikum salam in response. But then he looked at me again and he said, "You're not Somali." And I said, "No, I'm not."
So even the adults.
Even the adults.
Even
I
the
said,
adults.
"No, I'm not." And I said, "Are you a Muslim?" And I said, "Yes, I just became one." And he looked at me again and he said, "No." And he couldn't put the two together.
Exactly.
Of somebody not being Somali and being Muslim. And so certainly I think, you know, having a center that meets their needs is good.
Yeah.
But what about their children then? And what about us who are converts, who have lived in America all of our lives? All we know is essentially a Christian type culture.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Do you think out of that mix that there will arise a specifically American flavored Islam? And I don't want to say that it's American Islam.
Mm-hmm.
It's an Islam that's flavored with American culture, as it were. Just like there's an Islam flavored with Pakistani culture
Mm-hmm.
or Iranian culture. Do you see that as a real possibility?
I think it has to be. I think it really has to be, because the one thing is, and we both know, that Islam is growing in the United States. It is the fastest growing religion in the United States as well as the world.
Yes.
So I think because of this, there is going to have to be a necessity for masjids to have English, you know, predominantly. I think also it's going to be, you know, I think again it depends on the masjid, but I see it as a requirement, because whenever you have population, you're going to have maybe not necessarily more demands, but there's going to be, you are going to have more of an impact. Yeah. And the more that we communicate with each other, the more that we spend time at masjids and having our children there, as well as the immigrant population, their children, you know, in all likelihoods, English is going to be their first language.
Yes.
And they are growing up in America. So even though they might be second generation Somali or Afghani or Saudi or whatever, they are going to be raised in this culture, this society. They will know the cartoons of American television. They will know Nintendo games or whatever. And these are going to be the children growing up in the society. So basically, we are kind of the frontiers, because we are kind of first generation for our families being Muslim, but it's going to be us plus the new generation. And I think there has to be something that is addressed from this. And then also, as we start to get more traditions, like I know when our children were young, my husband and I, we decided, okay, we're not in the Middle East for Eid or for our holidays, but we want to make it special to have it here. So we started to have things that our children did for Eid al-Fitr, like, you know, the Eid after the month of Ramadan. Mm-hmm. We decided we want to have lights, we want to have decorations up in the house. So we kind of started our own traditions.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
And it works. It works.
So do you think that we might see a point where Muslims have Christmas trees in their house?
It might not go to that extent. But, you know, the one thing is, I don't know if in the Middle East, if we buy the Christmas lights, we hang the Christmas lights in the house, we might have decorations because it's available. You go in after Christmas, you get great sales, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But, and all of a sudden, you just kind of turn that culture thing into something that works for us as Muslims.
Yes, yes. And, you know, I think in some ways that happens wherever. Wherever a belief system ends up going, it has an impact with the culture. We all know that Jesus wasn't born on Christmas Day.
Yes,
we know
true.
that. And we know that basically the early church Christianized a pagan holiday. They yanked it away from those pagans and made it their own. In part, I think, because it would then make pagans feel more comfortable coming into a faith that was different from what they were used to. It's the holiday on the same day, we're just celebrating something different.
Exactly.
So I don't know if to that extent it will happen with Islam, but I do think that as we bring in American culture, probably we bring in both good and bad aspects of American culture. But
and that's true, because you're going to have different personalities of different people. But again, it's going to relate to the community around them. How much are they following true Islam? Do they know the rulings of Islam? And then, because Islam is truly a religion, and I hate to even use that term religion, because it is a way of life. So because we as Americans living in this country as Muslims have to kind of infiltrate it into our daily life, and it really takes care of everything. You know, how you dress, how you celebrate the holidays. For us that have non-Muslim families, it's affected us also, so that we have to maybe compromise in some things, and then some things we have to be more set in, that we have to say, no, we can't really do that. We have to stay away from that. But, you know, it's adapted us to dealing with our surroundings, so that we're not offending people, but yet we're trying to practice our religion.
Now, and that's true for us. I know that I have some people on the Christmas list that I can't take off, at least not yet. But now, when we're looking at how the children of immigrants are going to come into this, eventually, you know, we're going to pass off the scene, and their parents are going to pass off the scene, and we're going to be left with again, another group of American converts. We're going to be left with the children of immigrants. Do you, and you've had longer experience at the center than I have, do you see that there's a blending here of these two groups, and how that works? Or
I do, and actually, the one thing that allows us to blend, and I think it's really, really good, is especially our month of Ramadan.
Yes.
30 days where we are all doing the same thing. We are inviting each other over to each other's house. We're bringing food to the masjid. We are doing everything that Muslims should do, no matter where you are, in what part of the world. So the more that we get to know each other, there is going to be that comfort of blending, you know, understanding each other a little bit more. And actually, I think for those people coming from another country, kind of like some of our methods. Some of them might say, well, okay, you know, we came from Iraq or something like that. We did it over there. And then maybe some of the immigrants are so kind of set in that way that they might mention that, and we'll say, well, actually, we do something similar over here. We just kind of do it just a little bit different. And then you kind of start talking and communicating about the differences as well as the similarities. And it allows you to get to know people a little bit more. And so because of that, it does.
Yeah.
We do kind of blend.
So I think we can say that, yes, at some point, we're going to have a real solid Islam here with an American flavor.
Exactly.
And it'll meet the needs of the people here.
And you know, brother, actually, because we were just talking about culture and a kind of American culture, of course, culture and religion go hand in hand, and each influences the other. We know that. Currently in the news, we have had the issue of a British school teacher that in the Sudan naming a teddy bear Muhammad.
Yes.
And we still have fallout from our own clash here in the Twin Cities with cab drivers and cashiers. Now, what do you think should we do to deal with this cultural clash?
Well, it's interesting, and I think here is where we see, in some ways, a difference between Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims. Last week there was a show on Channel 2 in which all the panelists were Sunnis, and the issue of the cab drivers and the cashiers came up, and there was a broad range of opinion going on there, and one of the panelists was saying that in Islam, and of course he really meant Sunni Islam, but since they're in the majority, they get to say in Islam, that it's not monolithic, and that's true, it isn't. But you have the different leaders of the mosques, or you have different leaders maybe at a university, and each one gives their opinion, and people will follow these different opinions. So I think that in part because Sunni practice, the rules regarding their practice were frozen 1,000 years ago. They have it more difficult to adapt to
because issues have changed in 1,000 years.
Yes. Well, they didn't have cars then,
This
for
is
example.
true.
They didn't have planes, you know. They didn't have processed food.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that have changed because of that.
And so I think there's a certain disarray in their ranks because of how they've structured their faith in the past. And what often happens is this approach gets taken up by the news media as this is the way Muslims do it.
Exactly.
And we Shias over here are saying, well, wait a minute. We don't do it that way.
Not quite right. Wait.
And I think part of that is because we have, I guess the best analogy would be maybe like the Catholic Church. I mean, they have a hierarchy, they have a leader of the church. I mean, we aren't set up like that exactly.
But there's similarities.
We have, you know, the line of imams from the Prophet that we hold as our leaders and are authoritative, and then with the last imam being hidden, there's a group of scholars who have carried on that function of providing us with guidance on practice. And they draw it from the Quran, they draw it from the sayings of the Prophet, and they draw it from past decisions of other leaders. And so we have a system in place that gives us more guidance on some of these issues. Well, really on all of these issues, because at some point, somebody asks a question, they give a ruling on it.
Exactly. Because
So
these are things that are going to continue to change.
exactly.
You
yeah.
know, so in the coming years, there are issues that are going to come up that we have no inkling or no idea.
Right.
So for us, as we're trying to practice, but yet we don't have the background or the knowledge of our scholars.
Right.
And
right.
so it means that we are lay people, and we have to decide who to follow or who to ask for these questions. But yet at the same point, you know, all of us, we can have different perceptions, different perspectives. And if this comes up, it's actually, I think, much more organized this way.
Yes.
You know, to make it
For
clear
us.
cut. It is.
Yeah,
it's
for
easier
us.
for us to follow
Yes.
rather than having, you know, this person over there or this person over there says, yep, you do it this way. This person says, no, you can't do it that way. You have to do it another way. So it makes them so random and kind of all over the board. But
Yeah.
for us, it makes it, I think, easier.
I think it's easier for us regarding these kinds of issues. Now, what do our Sunni brethren do? I mean, you know, in some ways, we're very fortunate in that some companies are very open to saying,
Yeah.
okay, you can't do this as a cashier. Fine, we'll find another place for you.
Yeah.
You know, if scanning the forbidden meat products or whatever isn't going to, you can't do that. So that's a good point. Now, unfortunately, the cab drivers are in a different situation because they're licensed to go to the airport or whatever, and it's part of their contract that they need to fulfill in carrying fares. And if they aren't going to do it, they aren't going to get the license to go to the airport. So they have to make a decision, really, whatever's in their conscience, you know, are they going to follow that, or are they going to follow their job?
Do their job, exactly.
Yeah, they have a tougher decision to make there on that. So I think that, you know, it's no different than any other person who is following a faith and wants to follow it as they understand it. They're going to have to make some tough decisions sometimes.
Truly, truly. Because I think, as we all know, our following our religion or following Islam, as well as any other religion, there are decisions that you have to make. What is your priority?
Yeah.
And it allows us flexibility, I think, for us that have maybe an education, a background. It gives us more likelihood of finding a different position where we don't have to make these decisions.
Right.
So it does allow us a little bit easier time of that. But I can understand these brothers are trying to follow their religion as well as they can. But I just think in this case, it just would be nice if there would be like one ruling or a consistent decision made on it, rather than having them, it's more chaotic.
They're almost like Protestants. You know, each Protestant group does its own thing, and so it's kind of that way. I mean, if you make an analogy with Christianity, it's kind of like they're Protestants, you know, on this issue, and each little mosque and each little imam, you know, they're doing their best. They're following what they see as the right path. Yeah, you were talking about the Sudan, and there's been a couple actually issues in the news fairly recently. There was actually a Shia woman in Saudi Arabia.
It was so sad.
Who was trying to get a picture back, you know, from a fairly innocent relationship as it looks, and was caught and gang raped, and she had to suffer the punishment because she was with somebody that she wasn't supposed to be with.
Yeah, yeah.
And we don't see that as fair, but at the same time, you know, there are certain rules of conduct within Islam, and especially in a nation that is dominated by Muslims.
Yeah.
Some of these rules might seem odd to us, but they do make sense in that culture to some degree.
It's true.
We also have to realize that in Saudi Arabia, it's kind of an offshoot Islamic group that is in control there, and Wahhabis are like Puritans.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to cleanse the faith of all extraneous matter and get back to the pure faith. And what often happens is it's a very harsh interpretation of the faith.
Well, the sad thing, I think, was, of course, for myself as a woman, after a woman has to go through something that is so humiliating and degrading as a rape, much less a gang rape, is so hard for a woman to even fathom what that would be like. But then, on top of it, because she was with someone that she wasn't actually married to or something like that, they took it to the next step, and then she was put in jail and she was lashed and things. So it made a horrendous situation even worse. And of course, we believe that there's also prejudice because she was Shia.
Yeah.
And so, and then because some publicity came out about the topic, then she got double this because she talked. How dare her talk against something like this? So it's just this poor woman.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot even imagine how she feels. And even they interviewed her husband. And he mentioned that she is not talking. She is just a broken person. She's affected so badly. So it's so sad. And unfortunately, Islam is not like this. Islam is supposed to be fair, and the punishment fits the crime.
Yeah.
But
that doesn't always happen, you know.
It doesn't.
No.
It's in theory, and it should work, but it doesn't always work.
Well, that is our show for today, and we hope that you enjoyed it and learned something from it. Please give us a call at the number on the screen or the email that's there. We'll be more than glad to answer any questions or interact with you. If you're from a church or an organization, would like for us to speak about Islam, let us know. We'll be more than glad to help. Thanks again to our production crew for a great job, and we hope to see you again soon. Peace be to you all.